Well, welcome back to the Family Building Podcast. We have a great interview today with Kim, and Kim is an adoptee, and our office had the privilege of doing her adoption. Kim, tell us a little bit about what it's like being an adoptee, and let's start. Maybe we'll go kind of chronologically from the time maybe you first found out that you were adopted.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be here, Ted. Yeah, my name is Kim, and I was adopted as an infant, and so yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of memories of like I just have always been right. So, my parents actually struggled with infertility for 9 years before they adopted me. They adopted a child 17 months prior to me. And then, so I was the second adoption. And yeah, we're 17 months apart. And then when I was 4 months old, they found out after 9 years of infertility that they were expecting. And then they went on to have, they had three biological children after my adoption. So, kind of a blended family and growing up experience with adopted. I have like a brother that's also adopted. He's not biological to me, but an adopted brother and then biological brothers and sisters. And so, yeah, it's just a little wild.
Kim, was there any difference in knowing that you had siblings that were biologically related to your parents and you were not? Did you find any inequalities in your home growing up, or tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my parents did a fantastic job with that. There was definitely like a difference, and they explained that to me like super early on, but never an inequality or one being more important or special than the other. And in fact, like I grew up not really realizing like the weight of adoption until I was like, I don't know, teenager, because my parents made it just such a normal part of life. Like it wasn't a thing. It was like, oh, you're adopted. Oh, you're bio. Like it was just life in our house.
When do you have the first recollection or memory, I should say, of the word adoption? Just even the concept, whether you really understood it or not. How old were you?
Yeah, so I actually don't remember like a definitive point in my childhood where I was like, "Oh, I'm adopted." And I've talked to my mom about this many times, and just asking her like how she made it such like a just such a part of my life that I never was just like hit with it. And she just always told me like even from like a super young age, she would answer my questions in just very age appropriate ways. And then as I got older, like I think she always told me she led or she kind of let me lead that, like with the questions I would ask, she would just give me an age appropriate answer at the time. And then as I got older, obviously those questions got a lot more detailed and like, hey, I need to know this or that. And so she gave me that information as I asked for it. It was never withheld from me. I never felt like she was like, "Well, I'll tell you when you're older." It was like she would answer the question that I had in an age appropriate way for right then. And then yeah, I just felt like all throughout my growing up experience, if I had questions, like she answered them as fully and as thoroughly as she could. I did have a closed adoption, and so there wasn't a lot she could. There were some questions I would ask that she just didn't have answers for, and I had to accept that early on. But yeah,
Let's talk about that because there's some definitions there, and I think that'd be interesting for people to hear. So, a closed
yeah,
adoption, legally closed adoption, would be if you were adopted, say, out of foster care, and there was actually no access to identifying information of your birth parents. This was an independent, or what some would call a private adoption. You're saying it's closed in the sense that your birth mother never really asked to have contact or updates
right,
regarding you,
right.
but it was really an open adoption in the sense that, which is leading into the next steps of what we want to talk about. You did have access to your birth parents
Yeah.
as you grew.
Yep.
And I also wanted to just capitalize on what you were saying, Kim, that I heard this back in the late 80s when I first started practicing by a social worker from an agency that said the best adoption is the adoption that answers every question the child has as they grow. And so that sounds like your experience, and it sounds like
Yes.
that wisdom holds true over the decades here. That as the child asks questions, the information is never withheld,
Yes.
but
Yes.
at that level of your cognitive development, you want to know, for instance, maybe what your birth mother looked like. Do you remember that question coming up in your mind?
Yes.
When, how about how
So
old
many
were you?
times. Okay, well, I mean, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I know I probably would have been around the ages of, I mean, anytime in between probably 7 and 10, I really started being like, now hold on here. And I think something that kind of triggered that was just like little kids, they're always like, oh, they're pointing out features about themselves. And it's interesting, especially now myself being a parent, I look at like the features in my children and I'm like, oh, that you have my ears. Because my ears are a very defining factor on my face. And they've always been a huge deal to me. And I remember asking mom, like, why are my ears like this? And like that was that it just opened up the conversation for her to, be like, oh, well, your birth mom actually, she had your hair color and some of your like face structure. It comes from her. Because I didn't have any photos, like you mentioned, growing up, and so everything I got was from just asking questions. And my mom always did a really great job of just answering those questions. My mom never was like threatened by me asking questions because I think my mom like could step back and say this is important for her. My identity was forming, as a young child. And so those questions come up, and if you're biologically related to the members in your household, you can kind of start looking at each other and be like, oh, I see we look like family. But God is so cool because so I have two sisters that are biological to my parents, and we all look so much alike. People always comment, especially my youngest sister. We look so much alike that when I have a little baby, when my babies are really little, they confuse me and my sister. It's just, God is so cool like that, right? But there were still periods of my life where I really had a lot of questions about why do I look like this? And my mom and dad were just so forthright with that information. They were always willing to answer all my questions. I remember one time I even asked my mom, how long was her hair? And mom's like having to show me. And I'm like, obviously that didn't matter. But in my mind, it was huge. Like, how long was her hair, right?
We've also heard, and this is held true over the years, that girls, unlike boys, maybe boys are a little bit later, but girls at about 7 or 8 years old tend to be cognitively processing this and beginning to ask more
Yes.
questions. And so I think that's an interesting point for adoptive parents and adoptees. A lot of times we talk about post adoption contact and whatnot. It's not that the kids are really cognitively, it's more for the adults. But as you move into 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, now you're the driver as the adoptee. At least we believe that at Family Building, that you kind of drive the narrative of how quick this sort of unfolding of facts and more information is gonna go. So Kim, I know that at some point you and your parents began having the conversation. You grew up in the Midwest. Your birth mother gave birth to you here in Southern California, and so there was a little bit of a distance factor. But you guys at one point spoke about coming out here and visiting kind of your roots. When did that discussion first start? And then tell us about planning to come out and actually arriving at our office.
Yeah. Well, all throughout my life, there was just a lot of questions. And mom and dad, they had always told me, like growing up, once you're older, like we really want to take you back and see where you were born and see the place that you came from. So when I turned 18, we really started having those conversations, and myself and my parents had both agreed that I really wanted to make sure I was, old enough to handle just the emotional, like there's just going to be like some things that come with that, right? And so I wanted to make sure I was at a good place. And when I was 18, my parents were like, "Hey, we feel like you're doing really great. Like we really want to take you back to California." And I was like so stoked, right? And so we just had the greatest time. It was actually, I know the point of the trip was to go and see where I come from, right? We actually went to see the hospital where I was born. We got to meet you and see your office, which was a great experience. But through all of it, I feel like I just what was important about that trip and what sticks out in my mind is not seeing Southern California. It was not, seeing the hospital where I was born or the town that I call my birthplace. More so, it was like the connection that I made with my parents. As an 18-year-old, going back there, and I just feel like we were on this quest together to like kind of close the book on some of those questions that I had asked over and over and over growing up. And I just got so much closer to my parents through that experience, and it was it was so great. And obviously, the cherry on top was getting to see your office and meet you. And yeah, it was a really good trip. It just really stands out in my mind as a impactful
Yeah.
point in my life.
It was a big day for us because you came somewhat unannounced and knocked on our door and said, "Hey, we are the such and such family, and this is our adopted daughter." And I couldn't
Yeah,
believe how fast time had gone, and we sat there and talked and
yeah,
shot some videos and pictures of us together. You found out, I'll just spoil a little bit of this. During the adoption, we were not sure who the biological father was, but you knew who your biological mother was, and you had a chance to meet your biological aunt. But tell us, you found out some information. Your mother had passed when you were about 11 years old. Is that
right,
correct? When did you find that out?
right. I
When you
was
in Southern California?
18.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, for some reason, I think we had more access to information when I was 18. I don't know how that worked, but or maybe my parents withheld that information. I'm not sure, but we had kind of dug deeper before we made our trip out. And I did find out that my biological mother had passed away. And it would have happened when I was actually 12 years old. And I'm just, yeah, I'm really thankful that I didn't actually have access to that information as a 12-year-old. I feel like that would have been really hard to navigate, like not knowing how to deal with those feelings as a 12-year-old. But that information was made available to me. I was 18 years old. I was able to deal with it in a really healthy way. But I did make contact with actually some biological, I think they'd be half siblings, and a biological aunt, which has been really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So you spent some time here touring Southern California. You met your biological aunt, your maternal aunt. Then you also, through meeting your maternal aunt, started asking questions about the possible identity of your birth father. And you've come up with some information that your biological maternal aunt thinks the person could be your birth father. And you've asked us to reach out to him via social media. We don't have the contact information, and we're waiting on that information. But give us a little bit of why you want to do that and what you're thinking about.
Yeah. One clarification. I haven't met my biological aunt in person. We've had conversations, but yeah, through that, she's something. I want to just say this. I kind of planned on not seeking out my biological father. I felt like once I found out that my biological mother had passed away, and I kind of made some contact with my biological siblings, I kind of felt like that's good. Like that answered a lot of the questions I had. But then in conversation with her, she really shed some light and had some information that was pretty informative. And she was like, I'm just pretty sure, and it's still proven yet, but she did shed some light on who she thinks my biological dad would be. And so I sat on that information for about 2 years, and I was just letting it marinate. And I think about it occasionally, but I very recently, over the last couple months, I have been feeling if it's possible to maybe make that connection, I think I would like to for several reasons. One of which is I think so he would have grandchildren. I have 4 children, and I think if I had 4 grandchildren, I would love to meet them, and I want to offer that opportunity to him. I'm fairly confident he doesn't know that I even exist based on a bunch of information that I have about that. So I think that would be shocking, but I think at the end of the day, it would be a good revelation. Like that'd be kind of fun to find out, right? And so I think he has a right to know that he has some grandchildren and that they're pretty great kids. I also want to kind of close the book on that, especially as my children get older and they're going to be soon within the next like 5 years understanding my adoption, and I want to explain that to them well. And I also want to have as much information as I can to give them. I don't really want my children to grow up asking questions about their mom's identity, questions that I am capable of asking now. And if there's answers out there, like I'd like to be able to have them to offer them to my children. And so yeah, that's kind of just the thought process behind that.
Kim, you reconnecting with our office has been really, really fulfilling for me. I think I've told you a few times that
As well.
you're the reason, you're the reason why we do this, why I've given my life and career to building families, hence the URL, family building. Adoption works, and you are living proof of it. In this closing, say 30 seconds, could you speak to a prospective adoptive parent, kind of like your parents here that many years ago, that are considering adoption? What would you say to
Yeah.
them?
People ask me this often, and I feel a huge weight when I'm asked this question because it's something that's so dear to my heart. It's such a huge part of me, and I feel so strongly about it. But here's what I would say to someone who is like weighing it. I know it can feel really big. And I think when you look at adopting a child, it's like I have so many hoops to jump through. I have so many variables. There's financial, there's emotional, there's this, there's that. But what I've told so many people in my life that we've had this conversation, and they throw all these reasons at me, like, well, this and this and this. And I'm like, if you're willing to love a child, that's all it is. If you are willing to open your heart and your home to love a child, the Lord is going to put everything else into line for you. He's going to make a way. Adoption is redemptive. It is redeeming a broken situation. And if you're willing to stand in the gap for a child that finds himself in that compromising situation, you don't need to listen to the fears. You don't need to give those fears place in your heart, because the Lord's going to work that out for you if you are willing to take that step in faith and to open your heart, open your home to a child. And you're going to change generations. I tell people this all the time. You're going to change generations. You are taking brokenness and you are cutting it off at the knees, and you're saying, no, like, I'm going to open my heart and my home, and the Lord's going to redeem the situation, and you're going to change generations. And all it takes is the willingness to love a child. And
Great.
let the Lord work.
That's great. Well, Kim, we thank you for being on. You give me hope. You excite us at Family Building for the future, and we want to keep doing these adoptions. We want to do more adoptions. Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for your time. So, thank you for joining us on the Family Building podcast. Take care, Kim.
Yep. See you, Ted.